My mother dropped a bombshell on who could marry me. The bride price must be at least $50. Then my sister started broadcasting to the world that while her brother was a bit pudgy, dark, and short, he was still prime husband material. Her friends were utterly shook and avoided me like the plague. Until one fateful day, a strikingly handsome man and Soo Won-roo stepped into the banquet hall together. In that instant, her sisters all lost their damn minds. This is the guy you called pudgy dark and short. This is your brother. It turns out Soo Won-roo was a notorious brother con, terrified that her besties would try to steal me away. She'd spent years branding me as short, ugly, and stingy, which resulted in me, ever since reaching adulthood, never having a single girlfriend. My foster parents were worried sick. Exactly what kind of wife are you looking for? Anyone who dreams of marrying my precious brother better love him more than I do first. Back then I was too busy hiding in her embrace, so she never caught a glimpse of my flushing face. She had no clue that she was the one I truly desired. My feelings for her were a taboo the world wouldn't accept, so I kept them buried deep inside, until the night everything was exposed. The woman who used to spoil me rotten actually slapped me across the face for the first time. Have you no sense of shame? The very next day she announced her engagement to my best friend. Don't you dare miss my wedding with Jinyan. By the time I finished reading, my tears had completely run dry. Right at that moment, the biological family search agency called me. They told me they had finally found my real parents, and so I made the final decision to leave her forever. I called my biological parents living across the ocean and spoke the words, "Mom, Dad, I'm ready. I'll move abroad to live with you." The moment they heard my voice, my parents burst into tears of pure joy over the line. That's wonderful, Xiao Yu. If it wasn't for that devastating earthquake years ago, our family wouldn't have been torn apart for so long. Mom and Dad are coming to bring you home right now. A wave of bitter sorrow washed over my heart. I took a deep, shaky breath to steady my surging emotions. Just give me half a month more. I still have some loose ends to tie up on this side. Once everything is settled, I'll head straight over. Right. Mom and Dad were being insensitive. After all, the Soo family raised you for so many years, and we heard your sister has absolutely doted on you since childhood. It's only right that you give them a proper farewell. At the mention of Soo Won-roo's name, my heart skipped a violent beat. When I was just 6 years old, a devastating earthquake separated me from my biological parents. Eventually, the authorities arranged for the Soo family to adopt me. The Soos were a legitimate high society elite family. Mr. and Mrs. Soo were always buried in their hectic business, and although they had technically taken me in, they rarely showed me any genuine affection. To say I was raised by the Soo family would be a lie. In reality, I was raised entirely by Soo Won-roo. At 7, when I was terrified of the crashing thunder, she held me tight singing lullabies to coax me to sleep. At 10, when I craved my classmates' snacks and toys, she literally bought out the entire convenience store for me, spoiling me into a little prince that everyone envied. At 14, when I collapsed at home with a high fever, she was the one sprinting back and forth to get hot water, patiently feeding me medicine drop by drop. As long as it was something I desired, she would always be the first to deliver it to my feet. People around here always mocked her for being a brother con. But no one knew that during those countless nights we relied on each other, I had long since fallen deeply in love with Soo Won-roo. But I never possessed the courage to confess. I could only hide within the pages of my diary, secretly recording every ounce of my affection for her, or pouring my heart out to my best friend Song Jingnyeon. Yet in my wildest nightmares, I never expected that Song Jingnyeon would betray me and tell Soo Won-roo everything. That night, Soo Won-roo stormed into my room with zero warning, her face cold as ice as she hunted down that diary, and ripped it into 1,000 jagged pieces. She hurled the shredded remains of my heart at me. Before I could even find the words to explain, she slammed the door and vanished. Since then, she's done everything in her power to dodge me. On the rare occasions our paths do cross, the look in her eyes is chillingly detached, as if she's staring at a total stranger. I wanted to demand an explanation, only to stumble upon Soo Won-roo pinning Song Jingnyeon against a wall, locked in a fierce, breathless kiss. I suppose perhaps fate had already scripted this tragic ending long ago. It was destined that Soo Won-roo and I would never be. It was destined that these years spent with the Soo family were nothing more than a fleeting, beautiful dream. Now it's time for me to return to my original path, and so I made my final choice. I decided to return to the home where I truly belong, and to bury my years of affection for Soo Won-roo forever. On this day, I headed downstairs earlier than usual. Watching my foster parents warmly inviting me to breakfast, I forced a dutiful, gentle smile, taking my seat right beside them. Then I revealed that I had found my biological parents, and that I had resolved to move abroad, to reunite with them at last. This is wonderful news. Xiao Yu, I'm so happy you finally found your real family. But have you shared this with your sister yet? I froze. Did I really need to tell Soo Won-roo? Since her heart was now entirely consumed by Song Jinyeon, would telling her or staying silent even make a difference? What exactly do you need to tell me? I spun around instinctively, only to find her standing right there in the doorway. It's nothing. Sister, you're back. Hearing that long-forsaken title once again, Soo Won-roo's footsteps faltered instantly, and she couldn't help but cast a searching look at me. When exactly did it happen? When did I stop calling her sister? Was it at 1815 or even earlier? Now that I've addressed her as sister once more, Suwanru's eyes darkened with intensity, tracking my every move for what felt like an eternity. She sensed that something about me had fundamentally shifted. After a long pause, she finally lowered her lashes and looked away. She walked toward us, placing the gift bag she was carrying onto the table. "Mom, Dad," she said flatly, "these are gifts Jinian picked out for you. Just a small token of his appreciation, and he hopes you'll like them. We love them, we love them. Jinian always picks out such exquisite gifts. Have you given him our proper thanks yet? Wanru, the next time you visit Jinian's home, make sure to take that tin of black tea from the cabinet. And if you're both free this weekend, invite him and his parents over for a visit." This was a blatant signal to start discussing wedding arrangements. I remained in my seat, silently observing their interaction, as a wave of profound isolation washed over my soul. My nails dug deep into my palms before I quickly forced myself to let go. In this fleeting moment, I felt it with agonizing clarity once again. I was nothing more than an outsider here. However, I won't have to agonize over these things much longer. With that final thought, I rose calmly and retreated toward the sanctuary of my room. Sensing the movement, Suwanru looked up from her casual banter with our parent, catching only the sight of my back vanishing behind the door. Is it just my imagination? From the second I returned until now, he's only uttered a single sentence. This was a far cry from the boy she used to know. That afternoon, I took my household register to the station to process my residency transfer. The moment I cleared the stairs, I spotted Song Jinian perched right beside Suwanru, grinning ear to ear as he watched her peel a tangerine. Suwanru's slender, elegant fingers deftly stripped the fruit of its rind, meticulously removing every trace of the white pith before breaking off a segment and pressing it to Song Jinian's lips. Song Jinian's cheeks flushed a deep crimson as he stole a glance at her, submissively taking the fruit from her hand with his teeth. Suwanru let out a soft airy chuckle, plucking a tissue from a nearby box to tenderly dab the corner of his mouth. "Is it sweet?" Song Jinian nodded shyly, picking up a segment himself and offering it to Suwanru. "You should try some too." Witnessing their intimate, picture-perfect display, I silently averted my eyes and made a beeline for the exit. "Xiaoyu," I turned back to see him waving me over. "Wanru is off duty today, and we've planned a trip to the park. Why don't you tag along with us? I wouldn't want to intrude on your date. We're all family, aren't we? There's no such thing as intruding. I have some urgent business to take care of. Maybe next time." At my second blunt refusal, the bright smile on Song Jinian's face instantly froze. "Xiaoyu, are you still resenting me for stealing your sister away? Is that why you're so reluctant to hang out with us? The one I've always loved is you, so how could anyone call it stealing?" That single line made Song Jinian's ears turn bright red. Suwanru let out a soft airy chuckle as she leaned into his embrace. "If he won't go, he won't go. Let him be. Indeed, she should let me be, so we can finally go our separate ways for good." I offered them both a polite, distant farewell and turned to walk out the door. After finalizing the residency transfer, I left the station and headed straight to the racing club. One entire wall of the office was plastered with the trophies and honors we'd earned, alongside countless snapshots of past races. Staring at them, my heart felt heavy with bittersweet nostalgia. I never imagined that goodbye would arrive so abruptly. My mentor walked in from outside and gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Looking at the man who had guided me for 10 years, that suppressed lump of sorrow tightened in my throat again. I dug my nails into my palms, taking a long, shaky breath. "Master, I'm moving abroad. My biological parents finally found me. I've decided to settle down overseas with them. But that's incredible news. Will you keep racing once you're over there? Racing has been my lifelong dream. I'm not the type to just throw it all away. I'll definitely keep chasing the checkered flag. Are you leaving right this second? The biggest national championship is about to kick off, and you have a real shot at taking the title this year. I've already coordinated with my parents. I'll wrap up my business here before flying out. I still have half a month left, which is just enough time to finish this final race." Only then did my master finally look relieved, patting my shoulder once more. We chatted for a while longer, and it was quite late by the time I grabbed my bag to head home. However, the moment I pushed the door open, I realized Song Jinian was still there, listening closely. I realized the group was deep in wedding preparations. The sheer variety of suits and bridal gown sketches was enough to make my head spin. I was thinking Xiaoyu could help me make the final decision. After all, we've been best bros for so many years, and he knows my personal taste better than anyone. He dropped those words just as I stepped through the door. "Xiaoyu, your brother-in-law is really stressing over this. How about over the next few days, you accompany him to pick out the wedding essentials?" I watched as a smile rippled across Song Jinian's face. But the moment our eyes locked, that warmth twisted into a blatant provocation. I lowered my gaze and considered it for a heartbeat before refusing. "Sorry, I'm booked too solid. Things at the racing club are piling up. I only have 15 days left on the clock. Before I vanish for good, I have too many loose ends to tie up properly. I simply don't have the luxury of playing shopping buddy for Song Jinian. But the second those words left my mouth, the atmosphere in the room turned ice cold. Your best friend is about to get married. Can't your own business wait for a change? It's settled. Tomorrow, I'm personally calling in to handle your time off. If she used her authority as my elder to forcibly clear my schedule, what right did I have to say no? Hearing that, a bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips, and I fell silent. Over the following days, I was forced to abandon my own priorities to focus entirely on shadowing Song Jinian, as he handpicked items for the ceremony. I assumed he'd just do a quick run through the department store, but he dragged me from the south end of the city to the north. From the grandeur of the wedding gown, down to the design of a wine glass, he demanded my input. Every single time I suggested he send someone to consult Su Wanru, he'd snap back dismissively, "Why bother your sister? That woman is a workaholic through and through. Outside of throwing money at me, she's totally clueless. You're the only one who truly gets my vision." Last time I asked her to help pick out the rings, can you believe what she did? She had an entire display case delivered to my house and told me to just take whatever I liked. He complained to me with his lips, but his eyes were overflowing with undeniable arrogance. I listened in silence. Since I didn't give him the envious reaction he craved, Song Jinian opened his mouth to snap at me, but his gaze suddenly caught a woman at the entrance. "Wanru, what are you doing here?" I shifted my gaze upward, watching as he sprinted toward her and dove headfirst into Su Wanru's embrace. "Didn't you say you were heading to the mountain temple to pray? I took a half day off just to come pick you up. Xiao Yu has been keeping me company these past few days. Why don't we all head up there together?" Su Wanru didn't even spare me a glance, simply grabbing the shopping bags and leading the way out. As the distant echoing toll of the temple bells rang out, the dense mountain mist began to dissolve, revealing the breathtaking mountain vista before everyone's eyes. I kept my head bowed, focusing intently on the ancient stone path beneath my feet, taking one heavy step after another. "What on earth is this?" A sudden voice shattered my thoughts. Looking up, I saw Song Jinian halted before a sacred Bodhi tree, scanning the prayer ribbons fluttering from its branches. "May Xiao Yu find joy in every passing year, and may every season bring him fulfillment. May Xiao Yu be blessed with health and a life free of suffering, surrounded only by the kindest of souls. May my boy Xiao Yu find peace in every dawn and dusk, safe and sound throughout the years." Signed, your believer, Su Wanru. Staring at those weathered ribbons of hope, my heart began to tremble uncontrollably, and my mind drifted into the distant past. Because of the trauma from that massive earthquake, my health had always been fragile. Minor illnesses every 3 days, major relapses every 5 to ensure my recovery. Su Wanru would trek to this temple every single week to hang a new prayer ribbon for me, begging the heavens for my safety and well-being. I never realized that over all these years, Su Wanru had hung so many of them. Even now, those wishes still cling to the branches, but Su Wanru and I can never go back to how we were. Wow, the bond between you two siblings is truly touching. It makes me feel like a total third wheel. Song Jinian couldn't bear to read another word. His face darkened with jealousy, and he turned to storm off. "Don't be ridiculous. You're not an outsider. You are my husband, the man I love. He is merely my younger brother. If these things upset you, I'll have them taken down immediately." As soon as the words left her lips, Su Wanru turned and ordered the attendants to tear every single prayer ribbon off the sacred branches. One by one, those symbols of a lifetime of devotion descended like falling leaves scattering across the dirt. They were trampled underfoot, becoming stained with mud. In no time at all, the tree was adorned with fresh ribbons, and every single one was inscribed with Su Wanru's intimate vows to Song Jinian. Finally, Song Jinian's arrogant smile returned. He cast a triumphant, mocking glance in my direction. "Doing this? Won't Xiao Yu be upset? A brother could never be as important as my husband." With Song Jinian finally placated and satisfied, the drive back to the city began. He clung to Su Wanru's side the entire time. I sat in the back seat, closing my eyes and preparing to drift into exhaustion, when the car's speed suddenly surged forward. I snapped my eyes open, but before I could even ask what was happening, a deafening, bone-chilling roar erupted in my ears. The vehicle suffered a catastrophic failure, smashing through the guardrail and rolling violently down the slope, before becoming wedged deep within a jagged mountain ravine. My head slammed viciously against the seatback, sending waves of darkness crashing through my vision. When a sliver of consciousness finally returned, I realized the horror of being pinned and crushed within the mangled seat. A thick branch had impaled my arm with brutal force, and beside me lay Song Jinian, who had also blacked out. He appeared largely unscathed, having simply lost consciousness from the sheer terror. Su Wanru in the driver's seat reacted with frantic speed, shattering the window and crawling out from the wreckage. She stumbled several times before regaining her footing. She looked at me gasping in suffocating agony, and then at the unconscious Song Jinian. After only a split second of hesitation, she hoisted Song Jinian onto her back. "I'm taking Jinian to safety first. I'll send someone back for you in a moment." Without waiting to see the expression on my face, she carried Song Jinian away, disappearing into the distance, as if terrified that he might suffer even the slightest scratch. From the very moment I decided to give up on her, I swore to myself that I'd never shed another tear for her sake. From now on, I would live solely for myself. Yet, as I lay here crushed beneath the wreckage in this ravine, I couldn't help but be haunted by memories of that earthquake. Back then, I was also buried alive under the rubble. In that pitch-black abyss, there was nothing but me. I was trapped for 3 days and 3 nights. After the Su family eventually adopted me, I relived those terrifying moments in my dreams every single night, trembling and sobbing under the covers. Back then, Su Wanru would always rush into my room, pulling me into a tight embrace while whispering, "Don't be afraid, baby. Your big sister is right here. I'll never let anything hurt you ever again." But now I'm forced to watch her figure grow smaller in the distance, until she completely vanishes from my sight. The sky grew darker by the second, yet Su Wanru never returned for me. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh, summoning every ounce of my remaining strength. Ignoring the agonizing flares of pain, I desperately crawled out from the mangled wreckage. Then, gritting my teeth through the torment, I violently wrenched the branch out of my impaled arm. Inch by inch, I dragged my broken body toward the road. I have no idea how long I spent crawling, but I finally reached the main highway before total darkness claimed my consciousness. When I finally came to, I found myself staring at a sterile hospital ceiling. My arm was encased in thick, heavy layers of gauze. My last fleeting memory was being rescued by a kind-hearted passerby. And from the moment I was admitted until now, Su Wanru hasn't set foot in this room once. According to the nurse, she's busy tending to Song Jinian. He only sustained minor scratches. Yet she booked out an entire floor of the hospital just to ensure he could recover in absolute peace. Hearing that, I instinctively glanced down at my own heavily bandaged arm. I remembered the year I was hospitalized for a simple cold. Su Wanru had treated it like a life or death crisis, refusing to leave my side for even a single second. On the day I was discharged, a crowd of friends came to welcome me home. Among them was a girl who used to have a crush on me. As she offered me a bouquet of fresh flowers, I instinctively moved to decline the gesture, but the girl stuttered as she cut me off. "Xiao Yu! Please don't misunderstand. These flowers are just to celebrate your recovery. I know you're leaving us very soon. I just want you to be happy and healthy wherever you go." I froze for a heartbeat before whispering my thanks. However, the moment I turned around, I saw Su Wanru standing like a statue in the doorway. In all my memories, she rarely lost her cool, but now her face was dark with unconcealed rage. Her gaze cold as permafrost pierced the flowers in my hand, before she abruptly spun around and vanished. I stood there in a daze, utterly bewildered, unable to fathom why she was so incredibly livid. But I didn't let it haunt me. Once home, I simply placed the bouquet into a vase. Suddenly, a heavy pounding echoed from my door. I leaned against the wall, limping slowly to answer it. As the door swung wide, Su Wanru's face was the first thing I saw. Ever since she discovered my forbidden feelings, our relationship had plummeted to absolute zero. She hadn't knocked on my door a single time since. So what on earth was she doing here now? I barely opened my mouth to speak, when Su Wanru suddenly lunged forward and pulled me into a hug. The sheer force of her unexpected embrace sent me stumbling back. The next morning, as I stepped out of the guest room, I found Su Wanru marching toward me with a deep scowl. "Why the hell was I in your room?" Seeing that she had zero recollection of last night's events, I prepared to explain. But she cut me off with an icy razor-sharp tone. "Did you pull some pathetic trick to get me in there? Xiao Yu, I've told you there is zero chance for us. Besides, my wedding is right around the corner. Are you still this obsessed with me?" I stood there momentarily paralyzed by her words, then lowered my head and remained deathly silent. What was the point in defending myself? In her eyes, my love for her was my ultimate sin. To the woman standing before me, every single move I made was calculated and wrong. Witnessing my bloodshot eyes and broken silence, Su Wanru's breathing hitched and grew heavy. Just as she began to step toward me, a gentle, familiar voice drifted in from outside. "Wanru." He strolled into the house with an easy air. But just as he reached out to pull her into a smile and an embrace, his jubilant grin suddenly faltered and froze. "Wait, why is the corner of your lip split?" "It's nothing. Probably just a nasty bug bite." She instinctively brushed her fingers against her own lips before casting a profound, lingering gaze in my direction. In the days that followed, I avoided any private encounters with Su Wanru. She was fully occupied playing devoted fiancé to Song Jinian, while I was frantically pouring every second into my training. Then came this day. Just as I was gearing up to hop into my car for a session, Master suddenly appeared with Su Wanru and Song Jinian in tow. "Listen up, everyone. Let me introduce someone. This is Miss Su and the new driver she personally fast-tracked into our roster, Song Jinian. Let's give him a warm welcome, everyone." Amidst the polite wave of applause, Master looked toward the outer circle and called out Xiao Yu. "I want you to take Jinian under your wing from now on." Once the introductions were finalized, Master deferentially escorted Su Wanru and Song Jinian to complete the registration paperwork. The moment the heavy doors clicked shut, the room erupted into a frenzy of hushed gossip. I heard Song Jinian try to join us once before, but his skills were trash, so they rejected him flat out. Man, Miss Su really is on another level. With just a single word from her, he waltzes right into a spot that we had to bleed for. Remember the gauntlet we had to run just to get here? Guess you can't beat a golden ticket. Not even close. One envious barb followed another in a relentless stream. My vision blurred for a split second as the reality sank in. No one on this earth understood Su Wanro better than I did. She was always cold-principled and unyielding, a woman who lived and breathed by the rules. Despite the immense power she wielded, she had never once abused her status for personal gain. Yet for Song Jinian, she had shattered her own code for the very first time. It seems her love for him is truly that deep. From that point on, Song Jinian officially joined the club, leaving me stuck in the role of his senior mentor. I honored my master's instructions to the letter, dedicating myself to coaching him with absolute sincerity. But Song Jinian was a defiant, unteachable nightmare. Not only was he dismissive and lazy during every session, but he also invented endless excuses to skip training altogether. This time, before I could even stop him, he had vanished again. I could only walk to the window to call out for him. But the moment I looked down, I spotted Su Wanru. I didn't spare another glance, simply closing the window to resume my grueling training. The moon was high by the time I returned home, and I immediately spotted Su Wanru standing at the main gate. Her expression was veiled in shifting shadows, giving off the distinct vibe that she was waiting for me. Just as I approached to ask what she wanted, she unleashed a cold, sharp interrogation. Xiao Yu, can you stop relentlessly targeting Jinian? If you despise him, just be man enough to say it. I was already drowning in exhaustion, and upon hearing those poisonous words, a tidal wave of complex emotions instantly crashed over me. Indignation, heartache, and absolute helplessness. I didn't even need to guess. It was painfully obvious that Song Jinian had been whispering exaggerated lies and venom into her ear. I didn't bother defending myself, simply sidestepping her to retreat into my room. From then on, I gave Song Jinian total freedom, which only served to fuel his insufferable arrogance. He'd merely clock in at the club as a formality, before turning on his heel and vanishing. When others boiling with rage tried to confront him, I held them back with a firm hand, silently shaking my head. This is Song Jinian's own professional evaluation. If he fails, he'll be forcibly expelled from the circuit. He's responsible for his own pathetic life. Besides, I no longer have a single second to waste on him. I assumed this farce would end there, but I never imagined Su Wanro would suddenly corner me, demanding I surrender my tournament spot to Song Jinian. I couldn't even process the words at first, until she repeated the question asking if I was willing. Only then did I look up at her, my eyes burning with a cold, lethal fury. You're telling me to just hand my spot over to him? I fought with everything I had to suppress my emotions, yet the unmistakable tremor in my voice betrayed me. He is your brother-in-law after all. Furthermore, it's just a single competition slot. Does it really carry that much weight? Su Wanru, you know better than anyone. Exactly what racing represents to me. Su Wanru's heart felt as though it had been seized by a crushing grip. Memories of those past years seemed to flood back to her, of every single time I had risked my life for the track. During our rigorous training session, his hands suddenly clenched into tight fists. But in the end, he didn't utter another word, turning away in a heavy, brooding silence. Ever since Song Jinian joined the club, solely because of a single request from Su Wanro, the organization gradually split into two rival factions. One group followed my lead, relentlessly grinding toward our professional goals. The other side hailed Song Jinian as their boss, neglecting their training day after day while obsessing over how to suck up to him, hoping he would whisper sweet nothings to Su Wanru on their behalf to secure more perks and benefits. The two sides managed to avoid a direct collision, at least until today's practice concluded. Xiao Yu, there's a technique I don't quite grasp. Could you give me a few pointers? I subconsciously furrowed my brows in annoyance, but just as I prepared to respond, one of Song Jinian's mindless lackeys suddenly gave me a violent shove. What's with that look on your face? Our Jinian is being kind enough to ask for help. How dare you show him such a pathetic attitude? What the hell is wrong with you guys? I should be asking what Jinian's deal is. He had plenty of time during drills but said nothing. Now that we're finished, he suddenly wants lessons. Is this some kind of deliberate provocation? I had no desire to escalate the conflict, so I reached out to pull my friend back. However, the opposing side mistook our restraint for cowardice, spewing even more venom. Scared now, aren't you? Let me tell you something. Our Jinian is the future ace driver of this circuit. Xiao Yu, being able to teach him is a damn honor for you. You're nothing but a pathetic orphan anyway. If you get on Jinian's bad side, don't be surprised when he kicks you to the curb. As the insults flew back and forth, I'm not sure who actually threw the first punch, but both groups instantly clashed in a chaotic brawl. Amidst the frenzy, Song Jinian suddenly lunged toward my side and delivered a vicious, powerful shove. I was already teetering on the very edge of the high platform, and just as I was about to plummet toward the ground, I lunged out and grabbed Song Jinian's collar, dragging him down into the abyss with me. The two of them plummeted from the skyscraper together, as blood-curdling screams erupted from every direction. The entire scene descended into utter chaos. By the time Su Wanro rushed to the scene, we were already being wheeled into the operating theater, staring at our mangled, broken forms. Su Wanru's face turned deathly pale, and her usually composed voice shook with a hint of panic. What's the situation, tell me? Miss Su, both Mr. Jiang and Mr. Song fell from the high platform. The impact has shattered the bones in both their legs. However, Mr. Jiang bore the full weight of Mr. Song's body, making his condition significantly more critical. We only have one dose of the specialized regenerative medicine, but Mr. Song's recovery is possible even without it. Should we give it to Jinian? Before the doctor could finish, Su Wanru cut him off mid-sentence, her tone absolute and unyielding. Hearing that cold, heartless finality in her voice, I, having just jolted awake from the agony, felt struck by lightning. She knows better than anyone, that for a professional racing driver, his legs are his entire life. The doctor explicitly stated that Song Jinian's legs would heal just fine, even without the specialized treatment. I fought through the blinding flares of pain, summoning every last shred of my strength, to let out a desperate sobbing plea. Sister, don't... I'm begging you, let me have the medicine. It's okay if you don't love me anymore. It's okay that you abandoned me in that ravine for a day and night. But you know how much these legs mean to me. I can't lose them. I still have dreams to chase, please. I reached my breaking point and wailed in total despair. Massive crystalline tears, rolling down my ghost-pale face and splashing onto the gurney. Seeing the boy who once bore the most horrific injuries, without ever shedding a single tear, now weeping with such soul-crushing grief, Su Wanru's hands hanging at her sides clenched into tight fists. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, the unconscious Song Jinian beside me reclaimed his senses. Recalling the agonizing snap of his bones during the fall, he too erupted into a terrified sob. Wanro! My legs, they hurt so much. Please, you have to save me. Hearing his cries, Su Wanro violently shook off my hand and rushed to grasp Song Jinian's. Be brave, darling. I'll have the doctor administer the special medicine to you right now. Without a shred of hesitation left, she barked orders for the doctor to inject Song Jinian with the cure. Witnessing this betrayal, I used every ounce of my strength to lunge towards Song Jinian's side, desperately trying to snatch the medicine from the doctor's hand. But my shattered legs were a dead weight that pinned my body down, rendering me completely immobile. The cold, sharp needle pierced Song Jinian's legs, and I watched in horror as that life-saving serum drained slowly into his body along with my future. 3 days later, I finally drifted back to consciousness. This time, I found Su Wanro keeping watch by my bedside. Her face was a mask of sheer exhaustion, with bloodshot eyes staring at me as I woke. She reached out a trembling hand to steady me, but I reflexively recoiled, dodging her touch. Su Wanru's hand froze awkwardly in midair, hanging there for an eternity before she finally pulled back. Her voice was raspy and dry as she spoke. You'll still be able to walk normally. It's just that you can never drive a race car again. It doesn't matter. I'll support you for the rest of your life. Jinian is my fiancé. I couldn't just abandon him in his time of need. I should have been drowning in a whirlpool of emotions. Fury, despair, unbearable agony, or even a bone-chilling scream. But as those feelings piled up in my hollow chest, the only thing that remained was a crushing sense of futility. Please, just get out. The hospital room descended into a heavy, suffocating silence. Eventually, Su Wanru stood up, whispering a soft, "Get some rest," before quietly vanishing. The moment the door clicked shut, I finally looked down at my mangled legs and let out a raw, unrestrained wail of grief. My dreams of the track had been ground into nothing but ash. Since the doctor's verdict banned me from racing forever, I gradually withered into a mere shell of a human being. No more tears, no more smiles. Just me sitting in a chair staring blankly at the sky until the day of the Grand Championship finally arrived. Ignoring the Su family's frantic attempts to stop me, I went to the track, slumping into a seat in the very last row. I fixed my gaze on the asphalt, watching Song Jinian standing there in the spot that belonged to me, stepping onto that grand stage, basking in the thunderous applause and bouquets that should have been mine. As the race reached its conclusion, Su Wanru stepped forward clutching a celebratory bouquet, while the crowd swarmed to shower Song Jinian with praise. I was the only one left sitting in frozen silence, watching the tides of people rush in and eventually drift away into the night. I don't know how much time slipped by before I finally rose and limped toward them. As she saw me approaching, Su Wanru instinctively shielded Song Jinian with her own body. If you're going to lash out, take it out on me. Don't you dare touch him. I'm not angry, I whispered. I'm just here to deliver your wedding gift. Those words sent a visible tremor through the gathered crowd. Follow me. Leaving only that brief command, I turned and walked out of the stadium. The very moment they stepped outside, a stray firework screamed into the dark heavens, exploding into a brilliant bloom of light. Petals of fire rained down like a golden autumn, one burst after another illuminating the midnight sky. A flicker of bewildered shock crossed Su Wanru's eyes. In the next heartbeat, she heard me speak. Su Wanru, do you remember the day I won my very first racing trophy? You lit up the entire sky with fireworks just for me. You said you hoped my future would be filled with blinding radiance, and that I'd be as free as the wind. Now I'm returning this display to you. I wish you and my brother-in-law a lifetime together, growing old in perfect harmony. The moment the title brother-in-law left my lips, Su Wanru's pupils constricted violently. She stared at me completely caught off guard. This was the first time I had ever acknowledged him as family in public. Her chest tightened with a sudden suffocating pressure. Just as she opened her mouth to say something, I had already turned my back on her and walked away. On the eve of the wedding, the Su household was a whirlwind of chaotic activity. Late into the night, the downstairs lights remained ablaze. Mother Su was busy directing the maids, decorating the bridal suite with extravagant supplies. Upstairs, a single lamp flickered in the silence of my room. I sat huddled on the carpet, slowly gathering every gift Su Wanru had given me over the years, packing them all into a massive storage chest. I tucked these mementos away one painful piece at a time, and then clutching this pile of heavy crates, I descended the stairs with a heavy heart. In the dead silence of the night, the house was already adorned with festive decorations, every single corner serving as a silent mocking reminder that this home was about to welcome its new master. I refused to let my eyes linger on the wedding scenery, carrying my boxes toward the exit instead. Just as I reached the door, I collided head-on with Su Wanru, who had just returned from the Song residence. What exactly do you think you're doing? Just tossing out some unnecessary baggage. Watching my cold detached silhouette as I walked away, she felt an inexplicable pang of anxiety tighten in her chest. Ever since that tragic incident, it was as if I had become a completely different person, robbed of my ability to race. She had expected me to scream to rage or to shatter, but I was unnervingly calm. A serenity so profound it was terrifying. I turned back to meet her gaze, and in the next breath I heard her mention Jinian saying, "He hopes you'll stand as his best man during the ceremony. He is my brother-in-law now, not my brother. Such a role isn't appropriate for a junior like me. You'd better find someone else for the job." With that, I turned my back on her for good, walking away one steady step at a time. It wasn't that I was inappropriate for the role. It was that their wedding day was the day of my final departure. On the eve of the grand wedding, I sought out Mr. and Mrs. Su carrying a small heavy box. "Father, Mother, I won't be able to attend sister's wedding tomorrow. The flight my biological parents booked for me is scheduled for exactly tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, I'm leaving this life behind." Why so suddenly? It's not sudden. I should have left a long time ago. Inside this box is every cent I've saved over the years. The amount is precisely enough to repay every penny the Su family has spent on me over these last 15 years. I offered a faint smile and shook my head, pulling a thick stuffed envelope from my coat pocket and handing it over to them. Mr. and Mrs. Su recoiled at the sight, shaking their heads, desperately trying to shove the money back into my hands. But I resolutely pushed it back toward them. "Please, you must accept this," I insisted. Then I dropped to my knees upon the floor, and with profound solemnity and all my might, I performed 3 deep kowtows before the elderly couple. "Mom, Dad, thank you for the warmth and care you gave me these 15 years. The debt of gratitude for raising me as your own is something I will carry in my heart until my last breath. From now on, I can no longer remain by your side, but I pray you stay healthy, and may your lives be long and full of fortune." I looked up, tears shimmering in the corners of my eyes, a faint trace of blood blooming on my forehead. On the day of the wedding, Su Wanru was supposed to be heading to the ceremony, yet she hesitated, unable to force herself to move. Instead, she paced restlessly outside my bedroom door. Staring at that tightly shut door in front of her, Su Wanru's heart suddenly flared with an agonizing heat. She had a gut-wrenching feeling that she couldn't leave, that if she stepped away now, she would lose something irreplaceable forever. "Sister, what's going on?" I pushed the door open, only to find Su Wanru hovering right there at my entrance. The sheer coldness and detachment in my gaze made her heart skip a violent beat. Why don't you just come with me?" I froze. Why on earth would I go with her? To watch her and Song Jinian flaunt their perfect romance. I instinctively glanced down at the watch on my wrist. I simply didn't have that kind of time. "I have a few final matters to settle," I lied. "I'll meet you directly at the wedding venue later." Su Wanru opened her mouth to argue, but Mother Su's voice was already shouting from downstairs. "Wanru, we're going to be late." Pitted between my blunt rejection and the frantic urging of her parents, Su Wanru still stood her ground, refusing to budge. Only when the shouting grew more insistent did she finally suppress the inexplicable panic clawing at her chest. "Find me before the ceremony starts. I have something important to tell you." I didn't utter a word, my expression vacant as I lowered my eyes. But Su Wanru wouldn't let it go without an answer. She repeated herself, stressing every syllable. "You must come find me." Realizing she wouldn't leave unless I gave her a response, I was forced to lie, offering a stiff nod. "Fine. I'll be there." Those 2 words finally acted as the reassurance Su Wanru desperately needed. She finally relinquished her grip on the doorframe and turned to leave. I watched from above as she descended and climbed into the bridal car, followed by the rest of the guests piling into the motorcade. Finally, the thunderous roar of ceremonial cannons erupted, and the wedding procession began to drift away, shrinking bit by bit within my line of sight, until it vanished completely into the horizon. Happy wedding day, Su Wanru. Goodbye, forever. With that final farewell, I grabbed my pre-packed suitcase and headed downstairs. Stepping out the door, I began my long walk toward the airport, setting my pace toward a brand new life. My silhouette was one of absolute finality. I didn't look back once. The union between the Song and Su families was the biggest headline in all of Beijing. Countless spectators had gathered early, lining both sides of the route the procession would take, waiting for the Sus to toss wedding favors and candy. Blessings and cheers echoed in a relentless stream, yet inside the lead car Su Wanru felt no joy at all. She recalled the frantic, violent pounding of her heart outside my bedroom door earlier that morning, and that same cold dread began to claw at her again. She felt as though something vital was slipping through her fingers. Because the Su family's status far eclipsed that of the Songs, Su Wanru had personally led the bridal pickup herself. The Sus didn't care for ancient dusty traditions. They simply wanted the world to understand that Su Wanro marrying Song Jinyan was a blessing for his family. Their daughter was marrying down by choice, not climbing the social ladder through some hollow corporate alliance. The Song residence was equally decked out in grandeur, draped in vibrant festive silk ribbons. Song Jinyan's groomsmen were crowded onto the balcony, scanning the distance for the first sign of the Su motorcade. Finally, as the clock struck 11, the Su family's wedding fleet slowly came into view. The men rushed excitedly to Song Jinyan's side. "They're here! They're here! Miss Su has arrived!" Amidst the blaring music and celebratory fanfare, Su Wanru finally ascended to the second floor with her bouquet, entering Song Jinyan's private chambers. Staring at Su Wanro in her breathtaking wedding gown, Song Jinyan's heart raced with uncontrollable excitement. He was finally making Su Wanru his bride. After the lively wedding games concluded, Su Wanru and Song Jinyan boarded the bridal car as planned, heading straight for the hotel banquet hall. Throughout the drive, Song Jinyan kept observing Su Wanro. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. Ever since the bridal pickup began this morning, Su Wanru had seemed completely distracted and elsewhere. He reached out, gently tugging at her dress. "Wanru, is something on your mind? You don't seem like yourself. You actually look unhappy." "I was just overwhelmed thinking about our wedding today, so I was far too anxious to sleep a wink last night." Song Jinyan accepted the excuse without further suspicion, tenderly wrapping his arm around her shoulders. The motorcade pulled up in front of the hotel entrance, and the couple retreated into the VIP lounge. After resting and sharing a few more intimate words, Su Wanru finally stood up and stepped out of the room. Remembering the ultimatum she gave me this morning, she hurriedly summoned the head butler, ordering him to bring me to her immediately. As she waited for my arrival, her mind became a chaotic swirl of conflicting thoughts. She intended to give me a final warning that from today on, Song Jinyan was officially my brother-in-law. Regardless of my true feelings or hidden obsessions, I was never to show a shred of disrespect toward him. Even after Song Jinyan moved into the Su manor, I was still permitted to live under the same roof. I wouldn't be forced out into the cold, because in the depths of her heart, I was still her precious younger brother. She rehearsed 1,000 different things to say, visualizing exactly how she would break the news to me. But when she saw the butler return completely alone, her prepared speech instantly evaporated into pure panic. "Where is Xiao Yu?" The butler opened his mouth, struggling to find the right words to deliver the news. When he had been dispatched by Su Wanro to find me, he had run right into Mr. and Mrs. Su heading upstairs. Upon hearing his mission to fetch the young master, the elders shared a knowing heavy look. Calculating the time in their heads, they realized I should be boarding the plane right about now. With the wedding ceremony just minutes from starting, if Su Wanru went looking for me at this moment, she would undoubtedly discover a truth she wasn't ready for, and it would surely throw the entire wedding into chaos. To prevent a disaster, they ordered the butler to lie to Su Wanru, claiming that my old leg injury had suddenly flared up and that I had no choice but to head home and rest. In a desperate bid to deceive Su Wanru, they even produced a handwritten note I had penned in the past, but had never actually shown to her. It was unmistakably my handwriting, stating that I wasn't feeling well and had decided to head home early. Su Wanru took the scrap of paper, her brow furrowing into a deep, troubled scowl. She felt a gnawing sense that something was horribly wrong. Just as she was about to demand the truth, the announcement rang out. The ceremony was starting. The bride was needed on stage immediately. Su Wanru, who was ready to rush out of the hall, reluctantly pulled back her foot and began the long walk toward the altar. The butler watched her retreating silhouette and let out a quiet, trembling sigh of relief. The elegant, melancholic notes of the piano filled the air, and as Su Wanro gazed at Song Jinyan at the end of the aisle, she began her slow, rhythmic march toward him. Song Jinyan's face was glowing with an irrepressible grin, yet for some inexplicable reason, a sudden intrusive thought flashed through her mind. What would I look like standing there in a groom's tuxedo? She knew I had always been the mischievous, playful type. I probably wouldn't opt for a traditional boring suit, but would rock that black and gold style I loved so much. I wouldn't just stand there stiffly like Song Jinyan waiting for her, but would sprint toward her with light, energetic steps. My face wouldn't wear that shy, reserved smile of Song Jinyan's, but would be lit up by a radiant, wide-open grin. Before I affectionately wrapped my arm around her shoulder, perhaps she was drowning too deeply in that forbidden fantasy, because when the officiant asked the final question, if she was willing to take the man before her as her husband, my name slipped past her lips instinctively. She was still gripping the microphone tight, and the speakers amplified my name across the entire ballroom. The guests froze in absolute shock at first, before a wave of frantic whispering erupted. Wait, isn't Xiao Yu just the Su family's adopted son? Why did the eldest Miss Su just say his name? The parents of both families, sitting in the front row, turned ghost pale, their expressions hardening instantly. Mr. and Mrs. Su stared at their daughter in horror, their hearts pounding with mounting dread. How could their daughter mess up at such a critical moment? Song Jinian's parents looked absolutely livid, turning to demand an immediate explanation from the Sus. Up on the stage, hearing Su Wanru cry out my name, Song Jinian's face drained of all color, his hands clutching his trousers in a death grip. With a voice trembling with insecurity, he stammered, "Wanru, what on earth are you saying?" He instinctively lunged to grab Su Wanru's hand. They were just one final step away from the finish line, one breath away from becoming husband and wife. So why would she scream Xiao Yu's name now? If this were any other time, Su Wanru would have snapped back to her senses instantly, smoothly brushing off the slip-up as a meaningless mistake. But now her eyes frantically scanned the sea of guests. Some were strangers, others were familiar faces. But the one person she was desperately searching for was gone. In the next heartbeat, ignoring the shocked cries of the crowd, she abandoned the altar and sprinted off the stage, bolting toward the exit. Countless voices were screaming her name, some fueled by rage, others by heartbreak or pure despair, but she didn't look back once. As she tore herself away from her own wedding, Song Jinian instinctively tried to give chase, but his vision suddenly cut to black, and he collapsed onto the floor in a heap. The entire venue erupted into absolute pandemonium. Su Wanru threw herself into her car, slamming the accelerator to the floor, racing toward the Su Manor like a woman possessed. The memory of that look in my eyes this morning, that yellowed ancient note the butler handed her, and the blatant guilt she'd seen in the old man's eyes, a chilling sense of foreboding washed over her soul. The car screeched to a halt at the front gates, and before the engine could even cut out, she was already storming into the villa. She took the grand staircase. In just a few desperate, frantic bounds, sprinting to the front of my bedroom, she violently kicked the door open, only to find the room hollow and cold. Everything I owned had completely vanished. Su Wanru's entire body went rigid, and she grabbed a passing maid by the shoulders. "Where is my brother? Where is he?" "The young master, he left with his suitcases at dawn." The maid stammered, terrified by her mistress's intensity. The darkness in Su Wanru's heart grew exponentially more suffocating. She shoved the maid aside and charged toward the staircase, colliding head-on with her furious parents who had just stormed back. "Stop right there!" Mother Su barked. Su Wanru struggled desperately to break free, but in her frantic state, her foot slipped, sending her tumbling violently down the stairs. Witnessing this horrific scene, Father Su's eyes clamped shut in terror, nearly losing consciousness on the spot. This was supposed to be a day of absolute celebration, yet it had devolved into a pathetic, tragic farce. The Su family rushed Su Wanru to the ER for emergency care, only to be met with a bombshell from the doctor. She was already 1 month pregnant. Upon hearing the news, the Song family swarmed her hospital room, beaming with predatory joy. They had assumed the alliance was dead in the water, but fate had handed them a miraculous trump card. Su Wanru was carrying the Song family heir. There was no way she could escape them now. No one was more ecstatic than Song Jinian. He never imagined the heavens would be so generous, blessing him with a child at the exact moment everything was about to fall apart. When Su Wanru finally regained consciousness, she found herself surrounded by watchful eyes, treated like some fragile high-value asset. "Wanru, you're pregnant now," they urged. "You cannot afford to take any risks. Now that you're awake, apologize to Jinian." Abandoning him at the altar like that left him wide open to public ridicule and shame. But Su Wanru wouldn't hear a word of it. She had to find me. She had to know where I had vanished to. She lunged from the bed, determined to hunt me down. But Father Su had no intention of letting her go. He signaled the guards to step forward and restrain her. Yet she fought them off with a ferocity they didn't expect, sending Father Su recoiling in sheer frustration. "You ungrateful girl, what is wrong with you? You are carrying a child, for heaven's sake. How can you be so reckless and run around like this? Xiao Yu, where did he go?" Her eyes were bloodshot and brimming with tears, her voice reduced to a broken, pitiful plea. Recalling the maid's words from earlier, Su Wanru's heart hammered against her ribs with dread. "Why are you even asking about him? Your only priority right now is... Now get over there and apologize to the Songs this instant." Seeing that her father refused to speak, she tried to shove past him, but he barked, "Seize her." A swarm of bodyguards lunged forward, brutally forcing her to stand before a humiliated Song Jinian. "Do you have any idea what day it is?" Escaping mid-ceremony like some runaway bride. Where are the Su and Song families supposed to hide their faces? "Su Wanru, if you didn't want to marry my son, you should have just said so. Why wait until now to drag our family's reputation through the mud? How is my son supposed to live after this?" Su Wanru clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white, clamping her mouth shut in a defiant, stony silence. Suddenly, the ward door was thrust open from the inside, revealing a deathly pale Song Jinian with his eyes tightly shut. Mother Song ignored everything else, rushing to her son's side to check his fragile state. "Why did you ditch your own wedding just to find Xiao Yu?" Recalling her daughter's string of bizarre actions today, an unthinkable realization began to spark in Mother Sue's mind. Su Wanru tightened her grip even further, completely paralyzed and unable to find the words to explain. Initially, she only wanted to track me down to tell me that I must treat Song Jinian as my brother-in-law from now on. But the moment she realized I had vanished into thin air, her entire soul was swallowed by a tidal wave of sheer panic. She was desperate to find me. But what would she even say if she did? Suddenly, a montage of my memories flooded her mind. Moments of my fleeting joy, my silent heartbreaks, and my absolute mental collapses. Then she saw my expression from this morning, that look of total closure. Slowly, those fragmented images began to merge, shifting back to the day her secret diary was discovered. Back to the moment I summoned the courage to confess, "Sister, I love you." Her ears suddenly started ringing, and she instinctively clutched her chest as her heart skipped a beat. "Did you run after Xiao Yu? Because you finally realized you're in love with him." Mother Su, having lived through it all, looked at her daughter's shattered composure and saw the impossible truth written all over her face. In the past, Su Wanru would have dismissed the idea with cold contempt. But today, after seeing my empty seat at the altar and finding my room stripped bare at home, the sheer terror of losing me made her want to scream. That feeling that had taken root so long ago, the affection he had buried so deep within his heart, had broken through the soil, blooming into a towering obsession. "He is your brother? How could you ever harbor such twisted feelings?" The very words she once spat at me were now being hurled back at her by Mother Su 3 years later. A crushing wave of sorrow surged through her soul. She finally realized today, with agonizing clarity, just how deeply those words could cut. It was merely a crush, a silent, unrequited love. And the words were never even spoken aloud. "It doesn't matter how much you love him now, it's useless. Xiao Yu already left the country to find his biological parents. He's never coming back. Xiao Yu, he found them. Why wasn't I told? Why was this kept hidden from me? Don't you realize the things you've done yourself?" Su Wanru's face drained of all color, memories of this past month flashing before her eyes. How she tore down my prayer ribbons just to please Song Jinian. How she callously abandoned me alone in that mountain ravine. And how she gave the only dose of the miracle drug to Song Jinian, sentencing me to never set foot on a racetrack again. Her complexion grew increasingly ghastly, her legs buckling as she nearly collapsed onto the floor. The world around her blurred into a distorted mess, her ears ringing with nothing but the sound of her own frantic heartbeat, and her ragged, desperate gasps for air. "I don't care what you were thinking before. You're married to Jinian now, and you're about to become a mother. Kill those old feelings right now, and focus on building a life with Jinian." Even though Su Wanru had fled mid-ceremony, everyone, including both the Song and Su families, now regarded Song Jinian as the official son-in-law of the Sus. Su Wanru's lips trembled as she tried to protest, but her vision suddenly cut to black, and she fell straight to the ground. When she finally regained consciousness, she saw Song Jinian sitting by her bedside, his face a mask of streaming tears and snot. The events of this disastrous day had dealt a catastrophic blow to his pride. A wedding is meant to be the most sacred moment of a lifetime, yet the person he loved had abandoned him for another. How could he ever hold his head up in public again? How could he even go on? To make matters worse, his collapse at the altar, combined with the shock of Su Wanru's pregnancy, had forced the doctor to deliver a grim warning. Because Su Wanru had endured such extreme emotional trauma, there was no guarantee the child would even survive. As these thoughts swirled in his head, his weeping grew even more pathetic and hollow, while his hidden resentment toward me intensified. Ever since we were kids, he had lived in my shadow, unable to compete. Even though the Song and Su families held similar status, his parents were obsessed with the Su family's wealth, forcing him to grovel and play nice with me, just to scavenge whatever crumbs the Sus might drop. Meanwhile, everything in the Song estate was reserved for his younger brother. He was left with absolutely nothing. Even his future spouse had to be someone who could pave a golden path for his brother's career. Initially, his parents had handpicked a match for him, a hot-tempered, divorced female tycoon. It took a desperate display of hysterics and suicide threats to finally make his parents abandon that plan. Driven by the need to escape such a fate, he had to take matters into his own hands. By sheer luck, I had once privately confessed my feelings for Su Wanru to him. Despite knowing I was merely an adopted son, he knew such a scandal would be viewed as taboo by outsiders. He immediately betrayed my trust and told Su Wanru everything. His original goal was simply to crush my delusions of climbing the social ladder through her. But he never expected that to completely sever my feelings, Su Wanru would actually ask him to play the role of her lover. Naturally, he leaped at the opportunity. After all, Su Wanru was a godsend compared to the nightmare his parents had tried to force upon him. So he put on the performance of a lifetime shedding fake tears and pretending to be the only one who truly cared for her. Su Wanru, blinded by his act, fell straight into his trap. One scheme after another, and they finally made it to the altar. But who could have predicted Su Wanru would ditch her own wedding for me? It was an ultimate humiliation that left him burning with shame. His parents mocked his inability to control her, yet in front of the Su family, they maintained a facade of pitiful victims, to bury the Sus under a mountain of guilt. In the past, Suwanru would have normally pulled him into a protective embrace, but now she merely stared at the ceiling with hollow, lifeless eyes. This cold indifference ignited a spark of resentment within Song Jinyan. He knew their relationship was built on a lie, that Suwanru only used him to provoke me, to shatter my hopes, and force me to stay away from her forever. But even though she had given him everything now, and they were legally wed, her mind was still fixated on me. Suwanru cut him off with a chilling glare. His face turned ghastly pale as he fumbled for words, while Suwanru cast a cold, detached glance at her own stomach. The doctor had just informed her that she was already 1 month pregnant. She had always been meticulous about protection, except for that one night we crashed into the ravine, when she was so busy consoling Song Jinyan that she slipped up. Just that one time was all it took. If I hadn't already vanished from her life, perhaps bringing this child into the world wouldn't be so bad. But now that I was gone, this child had absolutely no reason to exist. To her, both Song Jinyan and this unborn baby were nothing more than chess pieces used to kill my lingering feelings. Now that she had finally confirmed her true love for me, there was no way she could let this pregnancy continue. I'm going to terminate the pregnancy. Those 6 cold words made Song Jinyan bolt upright in shock. But before he could utter a single protest, Mr. and Mrs. Su burst into the hospital room. Father Su unleashed a torrent of rage upon Suwanru until her eyes rolled back and she spiraled into unconsciousness. On the other side of the world, after being escorted to America by my biological family's men, I immediately spotted them standing at the arrival gate. My real parents clutching bouquets and scanning the crowd nervously. My features were a mirror image of my mother's face. A reunion 15 years in the making. The 3 of us collapsed into a tight, desperate embrace, weeping uncontrollably as the years of separation melted away. Mother wiped her tears away. But the sight of me caused a fresh sob to break through. Back at home, she refused to let go of my hand, gripping me tight as if I might vanish if she loosened her hold. My sweet child. The name your father and I gave you back then was Xingchen. It's okay, Mom. Just call me Xingchen from now on. After all, I've completely severed my ties with the Sus. I am no longer a member of that family. Naturally, I'll take the surname of my true parents. Mother nodded fervently, her eyes brimming with emotion. Suddenly, her gaze drifted to my injured legs. Xingchen, do you still dream of racing now that you're in America? Because if you do, I can contact the elite racing clubs for you right away. My entire body stiffened in an instant. My eyes fixated on my shattered legs with a hollow stare. My vision blurred as a sudden sharp sting hit my eyes, and heavy droplets of grief began to fall one after another. Witnessing my sudden emotional collapse, Mother panicked, her heart skipping a beat. Assuming she had reopened a jagged wound, she pulled me into a tight embrace, sobbing, "I'm so sorry. Xingchen, if you don't want to get back behind the wheel, we never have to speak of it again, okay? Mom, it's not that I don't want to race anymore." I finally let it all out, how Song Jinyan pushed me off that platform, and how Suwanru handed my life-saving medicine to him. The entire ugly truth finally spilled out of me. When I reached the part where the doctor declared that I would be barred from the track for the rest of my life, I buried my face in Mother's chest and wailed in total despair. Even though so much time had slipped by, revisiting those scars made the reality of my loss feel just as unbearable as before. Mother was vibrating with both fury and agonizing pity. She spent hours soothing my shattered soul, only creeping away once I had finally drifted into a heavy sleep. She immediately placed a call back home. "Old Meng, I need a massive favor from you." Ever since Suwanru's pregnancy was confirmed, Song Jinyan had officially moved into the Su mansion. He catered to Suwanru's every whim with obsessive care, acting like a devoted servant to ensure she lacked nothing. The menu for her daily meals never repeated once. Under the meticulous watch of both families and Song Jinyan, Suwanru's gaunt face gradually began to regain some color. The only shadow looming over them was Song Jinyan's insecurity. Despite having a grand public wedding ceremony, the 2 of them had yet to sign the official marriage papers. Legally speaking, they were still absolute strangers. Today was Mother Su's grand birthday celebration. No matter how much Suwanru dreaded it, she had to return home. But instead of a festive atmosphere, she found a scene of chaos, with everyone huddled in a circle, whispering and pointing. A sudden wave of panic washed over her heart, as she desperately pushed through the crowd to see the center. There she saw Mother Su desperately blocking Song Jinyan, trying to prevent the police from hauling him away in cuffs. After questioning those nearby, the ugly truth finally surfaced. Song Jinyan had intentionally shoved me off that high platform. During every single one of my training sessions, I used a camera to record my every move, planning to analyze the footage later to perfect my technique. On that fateful day just before the confrontation with Song Jinyan, I had actually been heading over to switch off the recording, only to be violently blindsided and pushed by him. The entire criminal act was captured perfectly on lens. Even without the digital evidence, there were dozens of witnesses who saw it with their own eyes. My close friends had initially tried to report it to the authorities, but because of Suwanru's overwhelming influence and status, the club's higher-ups suppressed them and blocked any police involvement. Until today. triggered by a single long-distance call from America. This buried conspiracy was finally dragged back into the light. At the exact same time, the news of Su Wanro giving my life-saving medicine to Song Jinian was leaked to the public. This sudden avalanche of scandals utterly nuked the Su family's prestigious reputation. The lead officer was dealing with a massive headache. But right then, a sharp commanding siren wailed from behind the crowd. Everyone turned in unison, watching as a stern middle-aged man stepped out of a black car, walking straight toward a trembling Su Wanru. He produced a special warrant and looked her in the eye. "Su Wanru, you are under investigation for criminal conspiracy and entrapment. You're coming with us." Without waiting for her to utter a single protest, he gave a sharp signal to the officers flanking him. They swarmed her instantly, shoving her into the back of the vehicle without ceremony. Mother Su shrieked in horror, trying to claw her way through, but Father Su caught her, holding her back with shaking hands. That man's authority dwarfed their own by a mile. He was someone their family could never hope to touch. Seeing this, the police no longer hesitated, grabbing Song Jinian by the collar and hauling him into the cruiser. The crowd slowly began to disperse, leaving behind nothing but a scene of total devastation. Mother Su's strength failed her as she collapsed onto the pavement. As Father Su rushed to pull her up, her vision faded to black, and she spiraled into a complete state of unconsciousness. Inside the cold, dim shadows of the interrogation room, the stern official sat across from Su Wanru, clutching a single sheet of paper, listing each of her transgressions one by one. Su Wanru found the accusations increasingly familiar, realizing these were all the cruelties she had inflicted on me. She had once asked Mother Su about my biological parents' identity, but they had dodged the question with a look of pure terror. When the official mentioned that, she had diverted the miracle drug to Song Jinian, causing the son of Ambassador Xia Xiaoyu to be banned from racing for the rest of his life. She finally realized with a jolt that the ambassador's son was me. She surged upward in a frantic state, desperate to confirm this shocking truth from the man before her, but the guards behind her pinned her down with a brutal grip. The official cast a frigid, disdainful look at her before coldly pronouncing her final judgment. Meanwhile, in the other room, Song Jinian's situation was even more dire than Su Wanru's. The investigation had unearthed a dark pattern, proving that Song Jinian was a serial offender of intentional assault. Beyond his crimes against me, there were several others who had crossed him and fallen victim to his calculated malice. Though the Song family was incredibly powerful and possessed the means to shield him, the sheer volume of his atrocities and the fact that he provoked a titan he shouldn't have forced them to completely abandon any hope of a rescue. In the end, the Songs paid out massive settlements to the victims, just to keep the family name from sinking further. Enraged by the scandal and the financial ruin, the Songs unleashed their fury entirely on Song Jinian, formally severing all ties and disowning him. They left him to rot and fend for himself. Ultimately, it was Mother Su who intervened to bring him home. She had once been quite fond of Song Jinian, viewing him as a gentle and sensible young man who could finally make her ice-cold daughter smile. Every time he had visited their manor, the house had been filled with warmth and laughter. But now, having seen the record of his vile deeds, she couldn't even manage a polite expression toward him. The mere sight of him triggered a splitting headache. In a final act of cold charity, she exiled Song Jinian to a secondary property, assigning a few maids to keep a watchful eye on him. She gave the staff a stern, simple warning. Just keep him breathing and alive. Don't bother with anything else he demands. It was ironic not too long ago, Song Jinian was the man everyone envied. But in a single night, he fell from grace into the dirt, branded as a villain in everyone's eyes. People avoided him like the plague. He threw tantrums and refused to accept his fate. But the nannies sent by Mother Su couldn't care less about his childish outbursts. "I'd advise you to give up on those delusions," they scoffed. "If it weren't for the child the young lady is carrying, the Su family wouldn't have bothered with you at all." Song Jinian's thoughts immediately drifted to Su Wanru and the unborn baby in her womb. He forced himself to calm down. After all, he had been stripped of everything else. That child was now his final lifeline. He had to ensure that Su Wanru successfully brought this baby into the world. With that calculated thought, he stopped struggling against his reality and quietly finished the remaining porridge in his bowl. Meanwhile, in the room downstairs, since Su Wanru had been demoted, with no hope of returning to her squad anytime soon, she sat paralyzed and defeated on the floor. Her legs were sprawled out aimlessly, her hands hanging limp and useless at her sides. The once sharp brilliance in her eyes had vanished, replaced by a hollow, murky void. A maid lugged a massive crate into the room, placing it directly in front of Su Wanru. "Mr. Recycling Center sent these back. They said these were the items the young master discarded. But because the contents were so incredibly valuable, they didn't dare dispose of them haphazardly. So they've returned everything just as it was." Hearing that these were the things I had thrown away, the darkness in Su Wanru's eyes suddenly ignited with a desperate spark. After my departure, every single trace of me in my room had been trashed, even our old family portraits. She had scoured every corner of the mansion, finding absolutely nothing left of my existence. Su Wanru lunged forward to grab the crate, but perhaps because she was so physically weakened, Her grip faltered and became unstable. The box tore wide open under her touch, spilling its contents across the floor. As she realized what lay scattered before her, her eyes widened in sheer shock. It was every single gift she had ever given me. The teddy bear in her hand was from my very first day at the Sioux Manor, a welcoming gift she had personally given me. Back then, I was so consumed by anxiety and fear that I couldn't find a wink of sleep for days on end. It was Su Wanru who would sneak into my room, clutching that bear while she whispered bedtime stories to me. She even claimed the bear was her guardian avatar, promising it would protect me in her stead while I slept. The pair of leather shoes beside it was the very first birthday present Su Wanru ever bought me. She had specifically commissioned a custom pair from abroad just for me, and the remaining boxes were all the annual birthday tokens she had gifted me over the years. Every year, the moment the clock struck midnight on my birthday, as the bells chimed to announce the new day, she would place a meticulously prepared gift right outside my bedroom door. She never missed a single year, not once, until that fateful day I turned 18. Once she discovered the hidden secrets within my diary, she never presented me with a single gift ever again. Su Wanru stared at each item individually, the agony in her gaze intensifying with every passing second. I had kept every single one of these treasures in pristine condition. If not for the slight yellowing from the passage of time, one would assume they were brand new. Her hands trembled violently as she reached out, tracing the contours of these memories with her fingertips. Suddenly, her eyes caught sight of something else. Buried at the very bottom of the crate was a notebook. Seeing the layers upon layers of adhesive tape covering it, she knew instantly. This was the very diary she had once ripped to shreds. The boy who had always affectionately called her sister had suddenly started addressing her by her full name. She had simply assumed I was growing up and needed space, so she never gave it a second thought, until Song Jinian cornered her in secret, exposing every hidden feeling I harbored for her. Only then did she realize I had been in love with her all along. Her initial shock had quickly curdled into cold hard fear. I had shared my most intimate secrets with Song Jinian, and Song Jinian was notorious for being unable to keep his mouth shut. If he ever decided to leak the truth to the world, it wouldn't just destroy the two of us, the entire Su family would be buried under the scandal. So before the secret could ever reach the light of day, she resolved to crush my feelings while they were still in the cradle, snuffing them out before they could grow. She couldn't even recall how she had stormed into my room, nor could she remember the frenzy of shredding my diary to pieces. But when she finally snapped back to reality, she was met with my shattered, tear-stained face. In that heartbeat, she was genuinely paralyzed with panic. Yet the weight of those secrets quickly turned her fear into fury. From the very first day you stepped into the Sioux Manor, I have never viewed you as anything more than a brother. How could you harbor such disgusting feelings for me if you still want a place under this roof? Then kill these emotions and bury them forever. Otherwise, if this scandal breaks and the whole city finds out, you'll drag the Sioux family's honor through the gutter. Her fingers trembled as they traced the scarred, taped-up diary. She could perfectly visualize the aftermath of her departure, how I must have wailed until my world fell apart, and how after being drained of every last tear, I spent hours meticulously taping those jagged fragments back together. Perhaps the agony was simply too much to bear, as the pages were still warped with the stains of my sorrow, stiff dried wrinkles where the paper had once been soaked. The salt from my tears had bled the ink into dark blurs, rendering many of the words nearly unreadable. Yet despite the damage she could still feel, the suffocating intensity of the love I once held for her. That's why I was so relentlessly stubborn back then, trying time and time again to win back her heart. But she couldn't allow herself to reciprocate. The mere thought of our parents' inevitable outrage convinced her that loving her would only lead to my ruin. So to surgically excise my affection for her once and for all, she decided to bring a stranger into our lives to play a part. When he learned of her desperate plan, Song Jinian was the first to volunteer for the role. She looked at Song Jinian's fragile, swaying figure, feeling a strange pang of sympathetic pain for him. Little did she know, until it was far too late, that every single move was part of Song Jinian's cold calculation. From there, everything fell into place with tragic ease. The closer she allowed Song Jinian to get, the faster the light of love in my eyes began to flicker and fade. When she first stayed out all night for Song Jinian's sake, and when she gripped his hand to announce their engagement, then finally their wedding, the adoration I once held for her completely evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a cold, hollow shell of indifference. That icy distance was the only thing left after my heart had died. Back then, she felt such a sickening sense of relief, relieved that I had finally mercifully stopped loving her. But now, by the time she finally realized her belated suffocating love for me, the agony was already far too much to bear. A wave of pure unadulterated sorrow flooded the entire room, as she collapsed clutching that diary and wailing in despair. Half a year had passed when I touched down at Jincheng Airport. Standing on this soil again, I remembered leaving for America. Back then, I was certain I'd never set foot here again. I never imagined that in just 6 months I'd be pulled back. But this time, I was here as my mother's representative, to attend her mentor's prestigious birthday banquet. Since my mother was tied down by her high-stakes career, she sent me in her stead to pay our respects, to ensure my absolute safety and well-being. She even insisted that my cousin accompany me on the trip. Though I had only been gone for half a year, staring at the familiar skyline and the bustling crowds, it felt as if an entire lifetime had passed me by. Beside me, Xia Jiacheng couldn't stop gasping in awe. Having been born and raised in the heart of America, this was his very first time experiencing his motherland. Before we boarded our flight, my mother had called one of her most powerful local allies, entrusting him to look after us with the utmost care. So instead of checking into some generic hotel, we were whisked away directly to the Gu family estate. The Gu mansion sat in the elite southern district of the capital, surrounded by a fortress of the city's most powerful dynasties. And ironically, the Gu residence, my mother's mentor's home, was just a stone's throw away from where I used to live. Gazing at those hauntingly familiar streets, I felt my consciousness slip into a daze for a moment. I had walked this very path a million times. At 6 years old, the Su family had brought me home, along this exact same road. At 15, after a grueling training session that ran late into the night, Su Wanru had come to pick me up and drove me back along this very same stretch of asphalt. On the day of Su Wanru's wedding, I stood in the shadows watching her bridal car disappear down this road. And finally, dragging my lonely suitcase behind me, this was the path I took to the airport to leave it all behind. As I drowned in the depths of my memories, a large hand suddenly appeared in my field of vision, waving frantically to snap me out of it. I blinked, finally returning to the present. What's with the blank stare, you okay? It's nothing, just thinking. The car came to a smooth halt in the Gus's sprawling courtyard. The moment the doors opened and we stepped out, the host rushed forward to greet us with overwhelming warmth. We quickly retrieved the meticulously prepared gifts and handed them over to the waiting servants. After a round of polite pleasantries, our host escorted us to our pre-arranged quarters. Both our rooms were located on the first floor, with glass doors opening to a stunning garden view. Once we had finished unpacking our belongings, we spent a few more moments chatting with Mother Gu, then set off on foot toward the Feng estate with our offerings, to pay our respects to my mother's esteemed mentor. Before heading out, we informed Mother Gu not to bother saving any dinner for us. She gave a warm nod, urging us to stay safe on the streets, before watching us depart from the gate. The distance between the Gu and Feng manors was short, but Xia Jiacheng was a restless soul who couldn't stay quiet, pestering me to tell him tales of life in the capital. Though I had called this city home for 15 years, my life had been a strict loop between the club and the Su mansion, leaving me with very little knowledge of the outside world. Furthermore, after Su Wanro discovered my secret feelings, I had virtually become a recluse, rarely stepping outside, except for those rare trips to the mountain temple. The moment he heard there was a temple nearby, Xia Jiacheng begged me to take him there to offer prayers. He had always been a wanderer by nature. Back in America, my aunt kept a tight leash on him. But here he was, like a wild monkey let loose from its cage. Unable to withstand his relentless whining and pouting, I eventually caved and gave him a nod of consent. Once we finished celebrating Grandpa Feng's birthday, "I'll take you there," Xia Jiacheng let out a cheer, finally releasing his iron grip on my arm. Upon arriving at the Feng residence, we found the staff already in a state of high-speed activity, prepping every detail for the grand birthday gala. The head butler spotted us approaching and hurried over to give us a remarkably warm welcome. Scanning the living room, I immediately locked eyes with Old Man Feng, who was regally seated on the sofa. I placed the greeting gifts we had prepared carefully onto the table before him. "Grandpa Feng, on behalf of my parents, I wish you a life as eternal as the sun, reigning for 3,000 glorious years. Xia Jiacheng and I also wish you the endurance of the 1,000-year oak, walking through countless autumns with unrivaled grace." This barrage of high-spirited blessings brought a wide, joyful grin to the old man's face. He patted the armrest of the chair beside him, gesturing for us to take a seat on the plush sofa, before asking with genuine care, "How have your parents been lately?" "Everything is wonderful," I replied. "It's just that due to their hectic work schedules, they were unable to fly back for your birthday celebration. Don't worry about it. The thought alone is enough. As for you kids, take them out for a tour, and just make sure you're back for dinner tonight. Young people like you should be out exploring the world. I'm far too old to be wandering around now." We chatted for a while longer before bidding the old man farewell. Following Feng Jiu out of the grand estate, the three of us hit it off immediately, the conversation flowing effortlessly. In the middle of a particularly lively topic, Feng Jiu suddenly slapped his forehead in realization. I almost completely spaced out on this. As it happens, I signed up with a racing club about 2 weeks ago just to learn the ropes for fun. I recall Xing Chen used to be a pro racer, right? Why don't you come evaluate the club's quality for me? If it's a bust, I'll just find a better one. However, upon hearing his suggestion, our expressions froze instantly. Wait, what's with the long faces? We probably won't be able to make it. My brother, for certain personal reasons, prefers not to set foot on a racetrack ever again. Oh, no worries at all. We won't go then. You're our honored guests. and my job is to ensure you leave here with nothing but smiles." Having said that, he instructed the butler to cancel the session with the club and led us toward a scenic park on the other side of town. Meanwhile, over at the racing club, Song Jinian was supervising a driver on the simulator. Ever since the scandal of his intentional assault broke out, the entire club had been dragged through the mud with him. One after another, high-tier members defected to rival clubs because their reputation had been completely nuked. Wealthy recruits were becoming a rare species. In the end, his mentor had to pull every string imaginable to court potential investors who were still willing to gamble on the club's future. While the remaining crew was training with desperate intensity, their mentor suddenly stormed in with a face like thunder. Clapping his hands sharply, he barked, "What's the point in practicing? Pack your bags and go home." Stunned by the mentor's sudden explosion of temper, everyone exchanged confused and uneasy glances. Even Song Jinian, who had been brooding in his chair, bolted upright in alarm. He paced slowly toward his mentor, his voice trembling as he asked, "Why are we stopping the grind?" "How should I know? The Feng family just sent word that they aren't coming to scout us. They've officially pulled the plug on investing in this club." As those words hit the air, it was like a drop of water hitting boiling oil. The room erupted into a chaotic frenzy of whispers and panic. Some drivers, driven by sheer desperation, even broke down in tears. They were banking everything on that funding to survive their training and upcoming races. Amidst the rising tide of wailing and complaints, Song Jinian's complexion turned a deathly shade of white. He dug his nails into his palms, hissing, "But why? I told you I have no damn idea." Song Jinian barely remembered how he managed to leave the facility. The harsh afternoon sun seared his eyes with a burning intensity, yet he seemed completely oblivious to the physical pain, numbly dragging his feet back to the manor. There, he collided head-on with Su Wanru, who was rushing out. He instinctively blurted out, "Where are you going? None of your business." Su Wanru didn't even spare him a glance. Pushing past him to make her escape, Mother Su had just received an official invitation from the Fengs, inviting them to the prestigious birthday gala for Old Man Feng. Normally, a demoted mess like her wouldn't be allowed to attend, but she had eavesdropped on Mother Su mentioning that the son of Ambassador Xia would also be making an appearance. After the truth was blown wide open that day, everyone in the elite circles knew that Ambassador Xia's son was me. At the mere thought that she might finally see me again, she abandoned all logic and self-preservation, determined to crash the Feng's party and test her luck, just to get a glimpse of my face. "What do you mean, it's none of my business? I am your husband." "We never signed the paper," she spat back, "and that pathetic wedding was never even finished. You are nothing to me." With that final sting, she turned her back on him and stormed off. Song Jinian gritted his teeth and began to shadow her in secret. He knew her desperation all too well. She was undoubtedly sprinting toward a reunion with me. Feng Jiu had taken Xia Jiacheng and me on a wild tour, and our group was finally heading back thoroughly exhausted. But as we approached the main entrance, my heart sank as I spotted an all too familiar figure. From the moment my heart turned to ash regarding Su Wanru, I had vowed never to cross paths with her again. I instinctively tried to pivot and find another path. But Su Wanru spotted me in a heartbeat. Xiao Yu, I let out a weary, frustrated sigh. It seemed fate wouldn't let me slip away so easily. I turned my head, casting a frigid gaze toward her. Su Wanru instinctively lunged forward to embrace me, but the two men standing guard by my side blocked her path with brute force. If this were the past, Su Wanru would have snarled at them to get lost. But now her fallen status stripped her of all authority. Furthermore, of these two formidable men, one happened to be Old Man Feng's own grandson, a man she didn't dare to provoke. "What business do you have with my brother?" He had already heard the sordid rumors of the atrocities Su Wanru had inflicted upon me. Before we even touched down in the country, my mother had repeatedly warned him to stay vigilant against anyone from the Su family, especially Su Wanru and Song Jinian. Su Wanru froze, caught off guard by the sharp question. Her lips parted, trembling slightly. What could she possibly say to justify herself? That she only realized her true feelings after I vanished? That she was ready to win me back and cast Song Jinian aside? She could dispose of him easily enough. After all, they never officially registered their marriage. She swallowed hard, her throat tight with nerves, staring past the two men at me. Though only 6 months had passed, I looked far healthier and more vibrant than I ever did at the Su Manor. Those eyes that were once perpetually clouded with gloom were now overflowing with a brilliant, steady light. "Xiao Yu, I know I messed up. I was wrong. I never should have treated you with such cruelty. I spent so long convincing myself I didn't love you, but your absence finally forced me to face the truth. It was always you. You're the one I truly love. As for Song Jinian, he was nothing but a pawn, a tool I used to make you jealous. So please, can you find it in your heart to give me one more chance?" She sounded like a stray wife finally waking up to her mistakes, begging for a mercy she hadn't earned. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't the type of man to simply wait around for a toxic woman to repent. Listening to her desperate, hollow confession, my heart felt like it was drowning in pure irony. "But didn't you insist on seeing me only as a brother? Didn't you say it was disgusting for me to even think of you that way? You claimed a scandal would drag the Su family name through the dirt. You used Song Jinian as a weapon just to drive me away. And now that I'm gone, haven't I finally granted your wish? You're the architect of this entire disaster. Yet here you are, Su Wanro, trying to play the regret card. Do you really think the world works in such a convenient way? As my words cut through the air one by one, Su Wanru's fingertips began to tremble uncontrollably. Back then, her only obsession was surgically removing my love for her, which is why she spat those venomous words without a second thought. I convinced myself I had moved on, that those scars had finally healed, but standing before her now, forced to endure her pathetic attempts at nostalgia, those buried traumas and jagged memories suddenly came screaming back to life. Su Wanru, you have the nerve to beg for another chance. But tell me, why didn't you give me a chance? When our car went off the cliff and crashed into that ravine, when I was desperately pleading for you to give me the miracle drug, just so I could save my legs and my future, why didn't you give me a chance then? Why did you choose to crush my only hope? I reached my breaking point, my body swaying, as a torrent of tears escaped my eyes. My gaze was a storm of raw resentment and bitter hate. We spent 15 long years together. She knew better than anyone that these legs were my lifeblood, my entire reason for living. Yet she still ordered the doctors to hand that drug to Song Jinian, who didn't even remotely need it. Night after night following that betrayal, I was haunted by nightmares. Beside me, Xia Jiacheng heard my agonizing outburst and reached out to steady me, his heart breaking for my pain. I shook him off and kept my eyes locked on Su Wanru. In America, I spent countless nights reflecting on everything. I admit I was young and incredibly naive back then, so blinded by my devotion to you that I failed to see the consequences of my own heart. I understand your hate and your resentment, but all I ever did was love you in secret. I never crossed the line, never caused you harm. So why did your hatred have to be so deep that you felt the need to banish me from the track forever? You kept promising me that you'd take care of me. But do you honestly think those lies are still believable? Su Wanru struggled for breath, fighting to maintain her composure, but my words were too much, pierced through her like a serrated blade, mercilessly carving into her very soul. She was utterly paralyzed, devoid of any defense. Back then, she was blind to her own feelings, obsessed only with the idea that cruelty would make me move on. That was the only reason she spat those venomous words. Furthermore, with her wedding to Song Jinian looming over her, and her total ignorance of his true twisted nature, she genuinely believed that even if I remained a shut-in, forever barred from ever working again, she had the power and wealth to keep me as a pet. She even assumed Song Jinian wouldn't mind the arrangement. But now the world had turned upside down. She didn't dare breathe a word of those arrogant delusions now. I tilted my head, glancing past her shoulder, spotting a pathetic figure cowering in the shadows. It was obviously Song Jinian skulking like a rat. Recalling that he was the monster truly responsible for my broken legs, a frigid, mocking smile spread across my face. Why are you hiding back there like a coward? I projected. Su Wanru spun around, her eyes landing on him, and her expression darkened into a mask of pure loathing. Song Jinian had actually dared to stalk her. Get back home now, she barked. Song Jinian was already seething after overhearing her earlier confession of love for me. Now being barked at like a stray dog, he dropped the act and stopped hiding, stepping out into the light with a defiant sneer. He reached out, trying to possessively grab Su Wanru's hand, but she dodged him with lightning speed as if his touch was poison. He gritted his teeth and turned his venomous glare toward me, scanning me from head to toe with predatory spite, his eyes lingering mockingly on my crippled legs. Listen here. Our club was on the verge of securing a massive sponsorship from the Fangs. Everything was going perfectly. We were training hard, until the coach stormed in saying the deal was dead. And after digging around, I found out the truth. Just because you can't get behind the wheel anymore, you couldn't stand to see our club succeed. So you manipulated the Fangs into pulling the plug. Xiao Yu, you really are just as pathologically selfish as ever, aren't you? Shut your mouth. Is this the famous Su family upbringing? What kind of delusions are you spewing? Su Wanru didn't even care about his supposed fragility. She wound up and delivered a thunderous slap to his face. The force sent Song Jinian crashing violently to the pavement. His cheek instantly ballooned into a scarlet welt. If you can't speak like a civilized human, then shut up. Nobody's going to mistake you for a mute. Su Wanru instinctively tried to chase after me, but Song Jinian violently shoved her to the hard ground. Wanru, I am your husband. How dare you try to crawl back to another man? Su Wanru collapsed onto the pavement, and blood from the life inside her began to stain the floor. Only then did Song Jinian remember she was pregnant. In a blind panic, he scrambled to call for an ambulance. Su Wanru was rushed to the emergency room in critical condition. The moment Mother Su received the frantic news, she raced to the hospital like a woman possessed. She delivered a thunderous slap across Song Jinian's face, abandoning every ounce of her refined dignity as she spat out curses for the very first time. What kind of hell did you stir up out there? Mother Su had been resting peacefully at home, until the butler came sprinting into her quarters, shouting that Su Wanru had been hospitalized. Terrified for her daughter and her unborn grandson, she had sped to the hospital, only to run into the Feng family servants at the entrance. That was how she learned of Song Jinian's moronic behavior. I was no longer the lowly foster son of the Su family, but the high-profile son of a top-tier diplomat. With the Su family's status currently in the gutter, they were in no position to offend someone like me. Worse still, while Song Jinian was hurling his insults, the Feng family's young heir was standing right there. The official who had previously arrested Su Wanru was actually Feng Jiu's eldest uncle. Relieved to hear that I was unharmed by the incident, Mother Su raised her hand and viciously slapped Song Jinian again, before turning that same fury towards Su Wanru. Look at who you are now compared to him. Xiao Yu's status is leagues above yours. How did you even have the audacity to seek him out? Su Wanru, after all the wretched things you did. Do you honestly think he would ever forgive you? Mother, I know what I have to do. You're going to be the death of me. Those words didn't offer Mother Su any comfort. Instead, she clutched her chest in absolute agony. Without another look at either of them, Mother Su stormed out of the room in a blind rage. Kill those delusional thoughts right now. The child is gone. Don't you dare let there be a next time. To her, this sudden miscarriage was a twisted blessing in disguise. She was finally free from any lingering burdens or unwanted ties, leaving her completely uninhibited to hunt me down. Witnessing Su Wanru's chillingly stoic expression, Song Jinian ground his teeth in a fit of suppressed rage. On the day of Old Man Feng's grand birthday gala, the elite and powerful gathered in massive swarms. After presenting our tributes, I stood aside with Xia Jiacheng, quietly discussing our upcoming pilgrimage to the temple. It gets pretty chilly up in those mountains, I warned. Make sure you bundle up properly before we head out. Also, they only serve vegan temple food up there, so packing some water and snacks is probably a smart move. Got it. Suddenly, a looming shadow fell across us. He glanced up toward the source of the gloom, and saw Su Wanru standing directly in our path. What on earth are you doing here? Are you actually heading to the mountain temple outside the city? I never realized eavesdropping was one of your hobbies. I couldn't be bothered to waste another breath on her. Tugging Xia Jiacheng away toward the opposite side of the hall, Su Wanru made a move to pursue us. But a group of guests quickly swamped her with pleasantries. Throughout the entire duration of the banquet, she never managed to corner me for a single word. At the ancient mountain temple on the city's outskirts, the dawn light slowly began to bleed into the horizon. The morning mist grew thick and heavy, swirling in massive ghostly white plumes that swallowed the narrow mountain path whole. Xia Jiacheng and I ascended the weathered stone steps, slowly making our way toward the sanctuary at the summit. The faint, rhythmic chanting of monks drifted through the air, punctuated by the distant echoing toll of a bronze bell. Ancient trees towered over the temple grounds like giants, their roots clutching stone slabs carpeted in thick moss. The wind rustled through the canopy, creating a soft, rhythmic hiss, while the bronze bells hanging from the eaves vibrated gently. I took a long, cleansing breath of the mountain air, resting on a secluded stone bench in a quiet corner. I watched Xia Jiacheng dart around like a curious toddler, investigating every nook and cranny of the sacred site. It should have been a moment of absolute serenity, but it was shattered the instant Su Wanru appeared. She's like a relentless ghost, was the only thought that flashed through my mind, as I watched her march purposefully toward me. Xiao Yu, please can we just have a real conversation? My initial instinct was to shut her down immediately, but then I remembered my impending departure for America. What if she stays obsessed and hunts me down over there? It's better to use this chance to cut ties once and for all. So having almost stood up, I sat back down on the stone. Fine, what's there to talk about? A glimmer of desperate joy flickered in Su Wanru's eyes as she moved to sit right beside me. But I instantly bolted upright and paced away, only stopping under the shade of an ancient Bodhi tree. Looking back at the Su Wanru who trailed behind. I'm on a tight schedule, I snapped. If you have something to say it now. Su Wanru took a deep shuddering breath, unloading every thought she'd harbored for the last 6 months. She claimed she never had real feelings for Song Jinian, that the whole act was just a ploy to make me move on. She went on to insist that she was clueless about the harm Song Jinian caused me, which was why her first instinct was to save Song Jinian first that day. After all, back then, he was her official fiancé. She added they were never legally wed, only had a ceremony, and that the pregnancy was a total accident, the grandchild Mother Su had desperately craved. But I've miscarried now, she whispered, promising to kick Song Jinian out of her life immediately. Everything she said boiled down to one thing, a pathetic plea for me to turn back, so we could return to the way things used to be. For the first time, I took a long, calculating look at the woman standing before me. Her physical appearance hadn't changed at all. So why did she feel so utterly unrecognizable to me now? Wanru, regardless of why you were with Song Jinian, or what your hidden agenda might have been, the trauma you inflicted on me was very real. A coward like Song Jinian wouldn't have dared touch me, if it weren't for your constant blatant enabling. You were the first one to alienate me, to neglect me and break me down. He only learned how to hurt me by following your lead. Honestly, you and he are a perfect match. Su Wanru's face drained of all color, never imagining in her wildest dreams that I would ship her with a snake like Song Jinian. But she loathed the very thought of him, especially after discovering his true vile nature. Her affection had long since curdled into pure disgust. I didn't even spare her a glance as I continued. You were the one who pushed me away first. You were the one who forced my heart to go cold. I used to genuinely, hopelessly adore you, simply because after I arrived at the Su Manor, you were the very first person to show me any kindness. You occupied the entirety of my youth. That's exactly why my feelings for you ran so deep. But once you cast me aside like trash, I finally saw the world outside and realized that you aren't the center of my universe. You and Song Jinyan did so many revolting things, yet now you think a simple reset can erase that history and make us play house again. That is absolutely impossible. Because of you two, I can never race again. As long as the phantom pain in my legs persists, forgiveness is something I will never grant. Honestly, Su Wanro, you're incredibly well incredibly sucks. You pretend to be considerate of everyone else, but in reality, it's always been about you. You used Song Jinyan to push me away, turning a fake act real, and now that you want me back, you claim you never even loved him. In your warped mind, we are nothing more than convenient tools. You once promised to always put me first, vowing you'd never hurt me, Su Wanru. You were the first one to break that oath. By what right do you expect me to crawl back and forgive you? As the weight of each truth crashed down on her, she slowly let her eyes drift shut. The words she wanted to speak became a suffocating burden, leaving nothing but a bitter metallic taste in her mouth. Suddenly her mind drifted back to a distant memory. That night, long ago, when I was too terrified to sleep. She had sat by my bed clutching that teddy bear, whispering bedtime stories until the dawn. At the end of the tale, she tucked the bear beside my pillow and made a solemn, unshakable vow. Your big sister is just like this bear. I will protect you forever. I will never ever hurt you. You will always be my number one priority. You're just teasing me, aren't you, sis? No, I mean it. Let's pinky promise. If you ever really do hurt me in the future, I will never speak to you again. Tears began to trace silent paths down her cheeks. Su Wanru opened her eyes once more to look at me, but I was already walking down the mountain without a single glance back. Xiao Yu. My footsteps faltered for a second, but I didn't turn around. Is there truly no hope left for us? Without a single word or backward glance, I vanished from her sight. Su Wanru finally collapsed, buried her face in her hands, and wailed. Wanru. The resentment and bitterness in Song Jinyan's eyes had evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a hollow, crushing sorrow. Previously, in his desperate climb to latch onto the Su family's prestige, he had committed every conceivable sin. He had even discarded me, the only person who truly cared for him. After finally becoming the golden son-in-law, everyone envied. He realized the woman he had given his heart to had a soul that belonged entirely to someone else. His gaze was a void of confusion and helplessness. Especially after eavesdropping on our conversation just now, the cold hard truth finally dawned on him. Su Wanru didn't love anyone. She was only ever capable of loving herself. His 4 years of absolute devotion had been a theatrical farce, turning into nothing more than drifting ash, scattered by the indifferent wind. He knew that if he had any sanity left, he would pack his bags and flee immediately. Leave Su Wanru, leave the Su Manor. But his own family had already disowned him, and the Su parents viewed him with utter loathing. The only lifeline he had left to grasp was to cling desperately to the woman standing before him. So he swallowed his misery and looked at Su Wanro with pathetic pleading eyes. He reached out to grab her hand. Wanro, you still have me. Can't we just try to live a normal life together? But Su Wanro mirrored my coldness from moments ago. She didn't even acknowledge his existence before turning to leave. The final spark of hope in his chest was snuffed out. He knew then it was all over. I paced back and forth at the airport waiting, until I finally spotted Xia Jiacheng sprinting toward me. Where the hell were you? What took you so long to get here? I just came from the hospital to witness a total joke. What kind of joke? Song Jinyan's love curdled into pure hatred. He pushed Su Wanro down the mountain path, leaving her with multiple compound fractures. Because help arrived too late, she had to have both legs amputated. As for Song Jinyan, he lost his footing and took a nasty tumble. His legs are completely paralyzed now too. Mother Su fainted from the shock when she heard the news. And Father Su told the butler that once they're discharged, he's tossing them both out onto the streets to let them rot and fend for themselves. Tragically for them, before they even checked out, another violent brawl broke out between the two. They tumbled headfirst down the hospital stairwell, ending up as permanent vegetables. Satisfied, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. The flight is about to take off, so I'm going to get some sleep. I didn't give the news a second thought. As I drifted off with closed eyes, the plane pierced through the vast horizon, vanishing forever into the clouds.